Today on Rodder's Garage, I am back on the 1958 Cadillac LS swap project. That's right, back on the 58 Cadillac today. In the first two videos, I got a lot accomplished already on this. Basically, first video was a lot of stripping garbage out of the inside and under here in the engine bay to prep for the LS install. Got the firewall shaved off, got some new panels put on there, got the brake and clutch assemblies mounted under the dash, as well as you can see the booster and master for the brakes. Got the engine centered out, made motor mounts from scratch for the chassis side on the car, got some gusset plates made. They're not finished welded yet, but all the plating is made for the motor mounts on the chassis side. Got the transmission cross member made, and basically I left off in the last video. I was going to originally just finish off the floor pans around the transmission, but I decided not to for a couple of reasons. I didn't want to finish any of this stuff up here because as I was standing under the car building the transmission cross member in the last video, I was really eyeballing up this X-frame in this car. I don't like it. I don't like anything about it. I'm high on the transmission side by choice. I'm a little bit higher than stock, so really, if I was to do a two-piece drive shaft in here, my front prop shaft is going to be angling down, and from everything I've learned in the past and everything I've read, you're not supposed to have the front prop angling down and then the rear coming out of that. It just doesn't work. You're asking for vibration, and really, two-piece drive shaft in general, I'd rather not deal with it. So here's the deal. I've got bucket seats for this thing. That's the plan in the future. Because it's going to be bucket seats, I have the option to cut out not only the floor pans here in the center and raise them, but I have the option to change up the top of the X-frame and make it a little taller, therefore achieving enough clearance to run a one-piece drive shaft in here. So that's my goal. I want a one-piece drive shaft from the transmission back to the rear end. It's going to have a slider in it because there's no actual slider in the transmission, so the drive shaft will have to have a slider in it to allow for, you know, rear end travel, so it can move back and forth up here, move back and forth up here in the middle. And basically, in order to achieve that, I'm gonna have to change up all the center X-framing and floor pans in this car, which is no big deal. I'm excited about that. But before I can go ahead and do that and figure out how far I need to actually go up with all that stuff, I need to get the lowering springs in this thing so I can see where the pinion height is at ride height. So that's what today's video is going to be all about. I'm going to put all the lowering springs in here, all 4 lowering springs in it. The rear is going to be really easy, but for the front, I have a box with all brand new bushings, ball joints, and steering in it over here. So while I'm doing the springs, I might as well get all the suspension stuff wrapped up on this thing today as well, or over the next few days, because I have to push all the bushings and stuff. Front and rear springs are here. I also have a brand new front sway bar, and I'm assuming while the front suspension is all out of it, I'll probably do some major wire wheeling on the chassis and get some stuff painted in some SEM rust guard on the front cradle area. So I'm gonna get this thing up in the air, start off with the rear springs. That should be pretty easy. Jump to the front, get all the suspension taken care of. This is the last time this thing is going to be sitting at its stock ride height. Hopefully the new springs, they're supposed to accommodate that weight for that LS in the front. Hopefully this thing levels out pretty good with the installation of the lowering springs. We're gonna find out. Let's go. I'm giving up on the upper ball joints. I'm done with that for tonight. I could probably plasma those a little bit or drill into them to get the rest of the rivets out. It almost looks like they were kind of tapered or dished in on the top a little, just kind of the way those worked out. Usually when I grind them off like that, I can punch them out with the air hammer, but it's not really working too good for me. And usually if things get stubborn like that, I'll take the gas axe to them, the torch, and just totally mutilate the bottom side off, which is actually what I am going to do to both of those. But I'm not going to do it here in the shop tonight because everything's covered in grease and I don't want to gas the place out. So I'm taking all this stuff back to my house to sandblast it. I'm going to sandblast everything here right down to bare metal because there's just so much grease and stuff all over them and they're rusty. I got a torch at home. I'm going to torch those ball joints off at the house before I sandblast them tomorrow. Get everything back here and then install all the new parts. And basically after all those are done, I'm probably also going to spend some serious time getting all this grease and grime off the rails, at least where the control arms go, and get that stuff in a coat of paint. At some point, I do want to pull the engine back out, paint the firewall and the cradle and everything underneath that after I finish welding the motor mounts. I don't know, maybe we'll do it in this video. Not sure yet, but I'm going to call it quits for tonight, bring those home, do a little bit of sandblasting, and we'll get back to it, well, probably next week because it's Thursday already. Should be it. Well, obviously a lot of stuff has happened here in the last couple of days. I did take these out the other night, brought them home, sandblasted them, brought them back down to the shop. All the front end components are now hanging. As you can tell, I also installed the shafts in the control arms, uppers and lowers, got all the ball joints installed. Basically, these are ready to paint after a quick spray down with some brake cleaner and the air gun. Ready to go over there. As for the car, as you can tell, I pulled the engine out, did a serious amount of goo removal, removed a lot of grease with the needle scaler in the beginning there, and wire wheeled for probably about 7 hours on the front end of this Cadillac. Did all up inside the wheel wells here, got the entire front stub wire wheeled down. This thing was absolutely nasty. Grease everywhere, just piled up in all the, anywhere grease could get trapped, it was trapped and built up 1/2 inch thick or more. I got quite the pile of powdered grease over here from all the wire wheeling. Some pretty nasty stuff. I kept sweeping it up as I went. Otherwise it smears to the floor or fills your boots solid on the bottom. So everything's cleaned up. Got all the rust cleaned off here in the back section. I am basically going to spray everything up here in the engine bay. I'm going to spray the firewall. I'm going to spray the inners, spray the inside of the fenders on this side and over on the other side. I'm going to black everything out here. I'm going to go ahead and finish up a few things. I have to finish the motor mounts. That's number one. I'm going to get all this plated in, filled in, weld those completely solid. I'm going to wash everything off, probably just spray it off with brake cleaner and hit it with the air gun really good. And I'm ready to start spraying some paint down tonight on the suspension parts and everything in the engine bay. Also, as you may have noticed, I made a plate here in the dark to seal off the original heater box hole going into the car because I am putting vintage air in here. So let's jump onto some motor mounts, get them all welded up, get everything washed down. It's time to spray some paint tonight, and then I'll be able to move on tomorrow or the next day, depending on how the paint dries. And we'll get the rest of the stuff assembled, engine back in, set it on the ground, and see what it looks like with the lowering springs. Firewall's painted, everything on the front stub is painted, and at this point in time, I am ready to start reassembling some suspension components. these 3-inch lowering springs, they made a big difference on the stance of this 58. And basically I think they nailed the springs right on the head. I'm a little high in the front yet right now, but by the time the weight of the hood, radiator, coolant, and all the accessories go on the engine, I'm sure this thing's gonna sit right down in the front and sit perfectly level. That definitely made a huge improvement on the looks of this 58 Caddy. So at this point, basically, I think I'm gonna go ahead and jump inside the car, fire up some lights, and maybe do a little floor chopping and see exactly what it's gonna take, or how much it's going to take in carving out that floor pan and X-frame to get a single piece drive shaft in here. Let's try it out. Alright, so with my big clearance hole cut in the floor of the 58 now, I was able to look back and kind of see where the pinion is now with the 3-inch lowering springs installed in the back. I took my tape measure and ran off the center line of the pinion up to the center line of the yoke on the back of the transmission, and basically, after doing a little measuring, if I raise the top of the X-frame up about 3.5 inches, that's going to give me all the clearance in the world for a 3-inch OD single piece drive shaft in this thing. And by raising that, I'm not really going to affect anything up front because, like I said, we're going to run bucket seats up front here, so I don't need to worry about the bench seat being too high or having to modify the bench seat. But I am going to make that tunnel, whatever height this comes out here, I'm going to redo the floor pans all the way to the back where it raises up for over the rear end, because I do think there potentially could be a clearance problem on the original bracing under this section or at the back on the drive shaft, especially if you put about 5 coolers full of beer in the trunk and 4 guys in the back seats. I'm guessing that that drive shaft might hit there. So I'm going to bring the whole thing up all the way back 3.5 inches, basically off the top of the X-frame here, all the way back at that height, and might have to modify the back seat a little bit at that point, but I looked at it already and there's no reason I can't just cut a notch in the front of the seat and kind of tuck the material down in that notch, and that should work out perfect with the tunnel raised like that back there. So that's the plan for back there. After that's all done, I got a brand new shifter to put on this thing. It's going to relocate it back further to a better position, finish off the transmission tunnel, and well, after that's done, I'll probably install the seats in the next video as well. Got to make a couple provisions for a hand emergency brake as well, stuff like that. So next video is going to be all the finish work inside the car, at least on the floor pans. As for this one, that's it. Got the lowering springs in, got everything cleaned up on the front, the chassis painted, the engine bay painted. It's looking pretty good at this point. So next video is floor pans. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching. Till next time.